Hello, my name's Andy Fleming, and I'm here to make a presentation, just a little historical overview of how we got where we are today. I'm part of the committee for ICOC 2.1, and this is all based on the idea that the cooperation proposal of 2006 has been designated 2.0 as a different structure and system for the ICOC. It's true that the 2006 proposal created the current delegate system, but I'd like to point out that the real ethos of 2006 was to involve more people in decision-making processes and the intentional involvement of more people in the global leadership and service paradigm. So this subcommittee has been created, and we purposefully called it ICOC 2.1, and are really talking about some small system upgrades to our current program. Just to kind of go back to 2003, and what's important about this little historical review is actually just to see the significance of having meetings together and brothers with convictions. What happened in 2003, as everyone knows, is our worldwide organization basically disintegrated. And that didn't mean that relationships didn't exist, but it meant that no one was in charge, no one was designated. And I do really want to say thank you to Greg Moretzky and Mike Tolliver, who hosted an ILC in Dallas, Texas, called it Faith of Our Fathers, and 350 people were in attendance. That was the only sort of major event happening in 2003, but it began sort of a pattern that would continue. We actually were able to have a conference in Chicago in 2004, and Steve Staten was the organizer. And during that conference, we had a one evening devoted to crucial conversations. And 30 brothers were chosen, worldwide representation, just for the discussion so that somebody could come up with some kind of proposal. The first thing we wanted to just notice together and agree upon was that we needed to help the non-U.S. churches that were in difficult circumstances. Another point was to talk about our identity and any possible philosophical differences. At that meeting, it was agreed that we wanted to keep the name ICOC. And we also wanted to say yes to worldwide fellowship, to missions emphasis, and discipling relationships based on the one another scriptures. And also we liked the idea there'd be some kind of annual reporting about the worldwide membership, and even an updated congregations list with Sunday meeting information. And then we also wanted to be able to review the neglected missions and make sure that we were really fulfilling our mandate for world missions. And then also just to really encourage each other to have mutual respect in all public communications. Then we moved on to 2005, and we had another meeting at that time. This was the By Faith International Leaders Conference. It was in Seattle, Washington, and we thank Scott Green for organizing that. At this time, also took place in this year, we had our first International Campus and Teen Leaders Conference in San Antonio, and Mike Tolliver organized that. We had a unity discussion at this meeting in Seattle, and again 30 brothers were chosen just to have some worldwide representation, and from those 30, 9 were chosen to basically solicit and come up with a cooperation proposal. And so those brothers got together and began to work, and proposals were solicited by November 1st. And also this group worked together in some of the more difficult situations we were having. We had invited Kip, but asked him not to speak at this meeting simply because of the negative rhetoric that was happening. And so this group, the Cooperation Proposal Group, began to meet, and we decided that we would rename ourselves the Unity Proposal Group, and elected Mike Tolliver as the chairman. And then we began to solicit our proposals, and interestingly, 37 proposals were submitted, and there's many conference calls. We together as a team read a church government book called The Five Views of Polity, and basically did the best we could to come up with a draft by November 21st. So as you can see from the slide, this is what's happening in 2005. The meeting was important that was in Seattle, and this United proposal for cooperation was put forward, and the first draft was already finished. In 2006, the group was still working, and also early in 2006, we had a mission support update, which told us that actually giving had continued, and there was 7.2 million being collected in 2005 and distributed to different mission work. So this was the good news. This was the all-time low of our missions contribution in the ICOC in many years, but it was a beginning point, and we began to move forward. In February, the Unity Proposals draft was sent out, and then in March, the final version was sent out, and it was called A Plan for United Cooperation, and it was published on Disciples Today. Also at that time, we began to publish the list of affirming churches, and moving forward, there was a steering committee of 9 selected. Again, this actually was all taking place at the Set Apart ILC in Hamptons Road, and again, thanks to Mike Fontenot for organizing. And the reason I'm mentioning just specific brothers is, at this point in time, with no one making decisions globally, it required someone to step up and volunteer and put the time and effort into making one of these meetings happen. So by the ICOC, we had now 70% of the ICOC churches had signed on, and then at this meeting, we also established the regional families of churches as the cooperation proposal suggested. And we began with 30 regions, eventually 30 families, eventually there would be 34. And so then these regional families selected chairmen, and now we're starting to have a representative gathering of people who can start to help us understand what is going on worldwide in the ICOC. In 2007, a number of new things began to be developed. We had planned the annual delegates meeting for the fall, and it was entitled For All Generations. And the steering committee was continuing to work. This had originally been the group preparing the proposal, but sort of as an interim, we had established this steering committee. One of the first decisions of the ILC in Los Angeles was to basically dissolve this steering committee, and it would be transformed eventually into the evangelist service team. And we began then to put together service teams. 10 service teams were established, and the chairmen were chosen by the delegates, and also the whole evangelist service team was chosen by the delegates. So we had 2 different processes happening for service teams, and the evangelist service team, which really would take the place of the committee that had worked on the proposal and then prepared for the ILC. This was going to be the central organization unit moving forward, but with feedback coming to the delegates and also with other service teams being created. So the delegates chose the chairman of these other service team, and then those service team chairmen selected their own teams and began to work together with advice and cooperation from the evangelist service team. And then finally, the women's service team was created, and at this time, it was formed from the wives of the core service teams, and which would be, of course, the evangelists, elders, and teachers. So this was what we had in 2007, and things were beginning to move steadily forward. Okay, in 2008, actually there was no proposals. We have a delegates meeting that is now having 60 delegates, 2 delegates from each of the regional families of churches. We can see that there's a core group formed in the global service teams, and this core group was having a spring meeting to help plan for the upcoming fall International Leaders Conference. And this year, excitingly, it would actually take place in Kiev, Ukraine. In 2009, there was 1,200 in attendance at the ILC that was hosted by Denver. It was called As I Loved You. And there would be one more proposal to ratify, or actually, sorry, two. The first would be the cooperation plan summary. And part of this was simply to take the original cooperation plan, which was probably 16 pages long, and reduce it into a shorter read and keep working with that to get the 10% of the churches that had not yet signed up to really present to them this and ask them if they would want to join us. Also, we needed to define roles in the ICOC and responsibility, mostly regarding the service teams and how they were going to work. So that was 2009. We came into 2010, and we had our meeting in Miami, Florida. And at this meeting, whereas the regional church families had two delegates, we began to actually create another system that would bring more representation to the larger regional families of churches. And so the first decision that was made was that there would be, for every 1,000 members, the two delegates, and then with every additional 1,000 members in a regional family of churches, there would be another delegate. So this actually brought the number of delegates coming together to 130. Also, we worked together on talking about what a healthy region is. And this proposal had been prepared by the evangelist service team with input from teachers and elders, and it was ratified at this time. So we would be able to talk with a common vocabulary about what it means to be healthy as a region and have some similar thoughts. And also, Hope Worldwide, we ratified an International Day of Giving, volunteer programs, and disaster relief. So this was, again, just a reaffirmation of our association with Hope Worldwide, and we just really wanted to make that connection clear and global. And then lastly, in 2010, we ratified a proposal to work on a 2020 vision. And the idea behind this was that all the churches around the world, and also regions and families of churches, would begin to think about and dream about the future and put together a plan that we then could present at an upcoming ILC in the near future. In 2011, we again had a number of proposals that need to be ratified. And the meeting took place in Budapest, Hungary, our delegates meeting. And as you can also see over in the bottom left-hand corner, we had regional and continental international leaders conferences. So rather than try to get everyone together globally, which is very intimidating financially, we started to have some regional and continental meetings interspersed with our global meetings. So our meeting in Budapest was called Christ is All, and there we reviewed a number of proposals. The first one was what it means to have healthy youth and family ministry. So we proposed some guidelines and ratified those. And also we re-looked at how the women's service team was being selected and came up with guidelines for that. Then there was an evangelist proposal for the service team and how it was operating. So just to make sure that it was still in good connection with the delegates, etc. A missions committee proposal was put forth to really look into and gather more information about our missions, and even in a comparative way for learning purposes. And then there was a conference and delegate meeting proposal basically talking about how to move forward and the schedule, for the most part alternating international and regional meetings just for sake of cost with the International Leaders Conference. And then finally, the teachers put forward a proposal for a unified curriculum where we could actually, we were selecting 12 topics as a core curriculum and start to standardize the minister training theologically across our churches worldwide. That was 2011. In 2012, we had an amazing celebration, the Mountain of the Lord World Discipleship Conference, and it was so encouraging. It was the largest attendance ever in the history of the ICOC, and there were 17,800 people from 96 countries. It was an amazing celebration. A number of things that were ratified at that meeting. The teacher's role and qualifications. We had not had many nominated teachers before this point and recognized teachers, and so that was discussed and published. And also amendment to the geographic church family participation, just talking about what's expected of church families and also members of the church families, and then also a proposal for conflict resolution and coming up with some standardized processes for that. In 2013, we had a meeting in New York City, and it was a church building focus, which was excellent. And a lot of the conference was spent in talking about how to build our churches better. The only proposal put forward that year was ratified, and it was about having Hope Youth Corps, and again, just integrating it more closely into the work of all of our churches worldwide. In 2014, we had an international leaders conference in Singapore, and we actually had, interestingly, no proposals to be ratified that year. In 2015, we met together actually in various places around the world. There were regional and continental ILCs, and a number of proposals were put forward. One was about just the cooperation between Hope Worldwide and ICOC, and this became a formal agreement and formally acknowledged that Hope Worldwide was the official structured benevolent arm of the ICOC. Not that Hope Worldwide wouldn't partner with other groups as well, but we would use Hope Worldwide as much as possible for our international benevolent program and larger scale programs. Also, there was an ICOC staff financial retirement best practices. This was initially based, of course, in North America, and the idea was to start working on this and then help also spread similar programs around the rest of the world. And then a proposal for cooperation follow-up, and that is really just getting those few congregations that had been in our fellowship that still had not joined in the cooperation proposal, just to, in a brotherly way, follow up with them and see if they would reassociate formally with us. In 2016, our meeting was in St. Louis. It was a delegates meeting. This was actually the regional or continental ILC for North America, and it was a fantastic meeting. And at that time, we ratified a number of proposals. The first one was to establish an administrative service team. This was really the result of the experience of San Antonio and just what it meant to organize such a large meeting, and we just needed a more global resource for this, and especially if greater finances were needed to take care of something like an international conference. And then also we created an ICOC events nonprofit. So together with the administration service team, there was also a vehicle that they could use that would be responsible reporting and deal with any combined finances that we might have in working together in the future. Then 2017 came, and this was an interesting year. Basically coming from the core service team's chairman, we had a Forward by Faith theme for 2017, and the discussion about a 3.0 structure and rebuilding of the ICOC came forward in this meeting. That happened in Dallas and then was circulated. As far as this subcommittee can understand, the underlying assumption of 3.0 presented in Dallas was that we're growing slowly and something needs to be done. Interestingly, this assumption didn't resonate with all families of churches, all the leaderships. It needed more explanation, discussion, definition. What are we talking about with growth, and exactly what does structure have to do with that? I think we all agree that leadership is necessary, Personally, the members of my subcommittee believe that we had more of a cultural problem than an organizational problem. That any solution that's ever going to fix something like numerical growth is actually going to become by affirming our biblical principles and by calling membership back to more Christ-likeness in areas where we are weak and lacking. This was also presented, just a little graph to show you what really had happened before 2003 statistically. And this is just simply to say that structure isn't everything, but structure is important. And what we're actually seeing here is statistically the ICOC hit a severe tipping point already in 1999. And just by following the annual amount of additions and deletions in the pre-2003 period, we can see actually that the crisis was happening and in fact was predictable. Regrettably so, no one had this picture clearly in their mind, or at least no one was talking about it back in those late 90 years. So where are we today? Okay, what is working? Well, over the past 10 years, the current organizational structure has definitely produced stability and cohesion. And so we identify ourselves as the International Churches of Christ. We are working together. We have hope worldwide. We have global communications. And we also have a mission societies. And these are the only globally funded cooperative endeavors. And they are functioning, and they have significant effectiveness and productivity. The missions fund at this moment is actually gathering in $9 million annually. So we have further the connections and cooperations of the regional families, and this has happened. There's the continental groups have taken shape in many places, and the strength of relationships within regional families of churches has also grown. There's been good discussion about what's working, what's not. And basically, the 2.1 committee believes all the right pieces are on the board. But before Ron Conklin will make our second presentation, I just want to sort of talk about what could be improved in this current system. You know, the first thing that I want to bring attention to is our service teams. And these are global service teams at this moment. And what's interesting is, though they've been selected and are connected to the delegates, the actual mandates of this service teams are sort of self-defined more than anything. And there needs to be a reconnect with the actual delegates and what these service teams are trying to accomplish. And then there's also another observation, simply, is this the right way to look at service teams at a global level? If you look carefully at just the lists of the teams, this really represents the way that a local congregation is organized with elders and teachers and evangelists and these different ministries. But what's interesting in our current system is that in all the levels between the local churches and then this global committee, there isn't a similar system. We don't have these teams representative in the continental groups or church family groups. And so the actual effect of having these groups together needs to be discussed, and that's something to be evaluated. Another thing is to reevaluate the kind of proposals that are coming through. In the last 5 years, as we noticed as we went through the proposals, they were all either administrative or related to Hope Worldwide. Not to say that these things are not important, but also you can understand why for many delegates these are not the most pressing or interesting of themes. And so we need to rethink a little bit exactly what is making up a delegates meeting, and even more than even fielding proposals, even looking at just having proposals of ideas and really getting more onto the table and getting more discussion happening. Then the next place we should give a little attention is our ILCs, our International Leaders Conference. Up until the present time, the training and the decisions of how to make this happen has been basically created by the evangelist service team. as we can see through our little short history of these past 15 years, these meetings are incredibly important, and what gets put into these meetings can make a great difference. And so we do really want to give more attention to those. And what's interesting also is the theme of the last year. I just going to point out this core service team's chairman. They did make a decision to basically put everything onto the table with 3.0. They became, in some senses, an unmandated executive team. And without passing a proposal, we didn't go through the normal channels of deciding to talk about 3.0 and making it even some deadlines and some issues. Interestingly, this caused some tension last summer. But we had a fantastic delegates meeting in Chicago last year. And actually, because of the structures put in place of 2.0, a lot of great discussion. Maybe the best delegates meeting that we've had in many years took place last year. And I do appreciate everyone that, out of their own convictions and wanting only the best, tried to push this forward in this way. But we need to understand that that bumped along a fair bit last summer. And part of that was because of not having a significant process and feedback system of putting these things in place. So it's worked out well, and we are now having good discussions, even including this 2.1 proposal. Next, I'd just like to point out our regional family of church chairmen. There they are, but we're not really using this group the way that we could. They haven't typically met together in any kind of separate kind of way, and yet this is a key part of our group, and in many ways should be directly connected to what's going on with the delegates meetings and the ILCs, and we really think in our committee that this needs to be reevaluated so that this group can have more influence. And then finally, right now we have, I believe, 16 separate mission societies. They are functioning well. They are getting support to where they are needed. But they don't work together. There's nothing that's actually helping them work, and even to be able to figure out, okay, how are the funds being distributed even from the very beginning? In other words, do some mission societies have just easier access to much more funding than other mission societies? And are there some mission works being underfunded? These are global questions that need to be answered. And so in our 2.1 proposal, we do want to engage with the mission societies much more and get them more involved even with what's happening with the delegates meeting, so that there's more conversation, there's more knowledge about resources, and also a better sharing of best practices so that we can move forward. We don't have a clear picture of the future of the ICOC. We are trusting in God that He will lead us. But we really do know that we are much stronger together than we ever are separate, and that there's a great power in establishing an understanding of how we should cooperate together. So I'm now going to turn the rest of this presentation over to Ron Conkling.